I'm delighted to welcome Alice Tew and Carly Radford, who are here to talk about whatever they want to talk about. But I invited them on because I've known their names for a long, long time, but I've got to know them better online through a neurodivergent therapy group. And they have a gorgeous new podcast, Too Much Apparently. And it's so lovely. Hi, you're listening to episode 78 of the Feel Better Everyday podcast. I'm your host and producer, Eve Menezes Cunningham. I'm a trauma-informed therapist, including embodied approaches, energetic approaches. I'm a trauma survivor. I have ADHD and I'm a senior accredited supervisor with BACP and a supervisor with IACP. I'm also an author and columnist and a self-care coach where I integrate lots of different ways of working for a really embodied approach. But really all my work is about helping you remember that you already know what you need. I help people with trauma and ADHD to take better care of themselves and their self, that highest, wisest, truest, most joyful, brilliant, miraculous part of yourself. So it really is remembering you are already whole, you're already complete. You are worthy, you're lovable, you're not too much, you are enough. And with that in mind, I am utterly delighted to be welcoming today's guests and look forward to hearing what you think of today's episodes. If you haven't already, do subscribe, and I would love to hear from you either in the comments or you can email eve@selfcarecoaching.net, and you can find out more about the book, the podcast, free resources, all sorts of things at selfcarecoaching.net or the feelbettereverydaypodcast.com. I'm delighted to welcome Alice Tew and Carly Radford, who are here to talk about whatever they want to talk about, but I invited them on because I've known their names for a long, long time, but I've got to know them better online through a neurodivergent therapy group. And they have a gorgeous new podcast, Too Much Apparently. And it's so lovely. And I wanted to have them on here, but I'm going to ask Alice and then Carly to introduce yourselves, including any links you want people to go to, and they'll be in the show notes as well. But welcome, 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 and thank you.
So shall I start? Yeah, okay. So I'm Alice Tew. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm based in Cheshire, but I work completely online. I mainly work with people who have kind of harshly critical parents, and so kind of dealing with the emotional fallout of that. The best way to find me is on Instagram, where you'll find me at Reparenting with Alice. Yeah,
I love it.
Me.
And I was admiring earlier your little hello sign because your email is hello@Alice Tew, isn't it? Do you want to give your website as well, or?
So my website is alicetew.com.
Perfect. Thank you. And Carly?
Yes, hello. My name is Carly Radford. I am a nurse by background before retraining as a psychotherapist, and I also work solely online with doing individual therapy and running groups. I specialise in a few areas, but I put those under the theme of sensitivity. So I'm known as the sensitivity therapist, and I work with either inherent or acquired sensitivity. And essentially what I mean by that is inherent is if you feel you were born a highly sensitive person, neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, so you have always felt like a sensitive person in the world. And I also work with acquired sensitivity, so if that is through stressful life situations, traumatic events, chronic anxiety, anything that over time has essentially made your nervous system more sensitive and more reactive in the world. So that's ultimately what I specialize in. You can find me on Instagram as @thesensitivitytherapist with underscores between the words. my website, which is currently being redeveloped, but it will be carlyradford.com.
Thank
And yeah,
Sorry,
email wise, I'm just hello@carlyradford.com.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask you both about sensitivity because you had a lovely episode about it. And I think it's so important. I think especially with trauma, with ADHD, we grow up, we get so told, oh, you're being too sensitive, you're too, and we can recognize that it is a gift, and we can also internalize shame around it. And I'm nearly 50 and I'm like happier than I've ever been, but it's still like, oh God, I'm crying again. And it's like, I'll cry out of joy as well. Like it's like full emotional landscape. It's the whole, but I just loved what you were saying. So if we start with the feel part of the Feel, Love, Heal framework I use. So if you tell me a bit about what you would recommend and what you've both done in terms of regulating, in terms of that kind of more active self-care around sensitivity when it all feels too much, if that's okay.
Yes, yeah. Or shall I go, or shall you go?
You go, Carly.
When there's three of you, it's like, who talks first?
Yeah.
Who knows who to go?
No, I'm just nodding and you can't see who I'm nodding at.
Yes. So I have always described myself, well, I say always, more in later years, I've always described myself as sensitive, but I now very much realize that I'm very sensitive, deep in my bones. And what I mean when I say the word sensitive is I can react quite strongly emotionally to things in the world. And a bit like you said, it's both in a way that can be challenging and also in a way that can be really lovely and beautiful in terms of those strong emotional reactions. And I also describe it as having quite a reactive nervous system. So seemingly small things, or that may be small to other people, are not small to my nervous system, and ultimately that can respond in various of ways, but I would often say that can translate to like emotional overwhelm or feeling stressed, feeling like things are a little bit too much. And it's only in later years that I've come to really recognize that and start to embrace that as that is who I am in the world. So I'd say particularly over the last 5 years, I've more like radically been moving towards that acceptance. And you mentioned from the feel perspective of the framework that you work with, how I regulate. I think that was what you were asking me.
Yeah.
So I regulate my nervous system through various of ways. Some of it's not super conscious, it's automatic. So I will sing throughout the day quite a lot as I'm just going about the day. And I think singing just automatically helps to regulate my nervous system. And there's a lot of science behind that, actually, which I didn't.
Elongating the exhalation, so you're activating the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, and you're also using your voice. So helping tone the vagus.
Yes, it's all related to the vagus nerve, and whether that's the breathing part, really taking control of your breath, really slowing it down and controlling it, and also through the vibrations of your vocal cords and what that is essentially doing from biofeedback to the vagus nerve. So there are various things that influence singing. So I think singing can be good joining a singing group, for example, but also just even if you're just humming to yourself throughout the day. So I've learned that there are things that I just do automatically throughout the day that help. So singing, vocalizing things. I like to just talk out loud to my dogs in various accents and things like that. Just almost using the voice as a form of play, I think really, really helps. And then there are the more active things that help regulate my nervous system. And they might be things like just curling up on the sofa, blanket wrapped around me, maybe heated blanket, cup of something warm, and a good book or something crafty. If I'm really overwhelmed, the crafty thing won't be too challenging. It could even just be an adult colouring book, something that doesn't involve much thought, but that's something that always helps me.
I love it. And before I ask Alice, I also wanted to applaud your talking about your nervous system. And it sounded like that acceptance. And we all mammals have our nervous systems. And with trauma, with ADHD, we grow up like thinking there's something wrong with it. Whereas the minute we accept it and it's like, how is it feeling right now? What do I need right now? It's just like, yep, the nervous system is this. It's like, it's raining outside. It's like, yep. I just loved the way you said that at the beginning. So thank you for all of that. That's wonderful. And Alice?
Yeah, I think I kind of share, some of what Carly's talking about there. And I think that awareness or that knowledge of your nervous system has been a really important part of it for me. So when I think about what I do to regulate myself kind of on a day-to-day basis, I think keeping things really small is really important for me. Like I can have a really strong perfectionist process. So I would love to, and even now when I'm scrolling through Instagram and someone pops up with this routine will change your life, I'm like, oh, maybe this is the one. But it's kind of bringing it back to the fact that actually, if I can just keep it small, having some kind of, non-negotiables that are tiny non-negotiables, like brushing my teeth. I know that if I'm not brushing my teeth, I really need to be kind of checking in again with myself. But like exercise, so I've been really struggling with exercise. I love going out for a walk. I love being in nature, but I've really been struggling to motivate myself to get out. So at the moment, I'm working on doing 10 shoulder rolls every day and just keeping it tiny and just getting that tick in the box, just giving myself that message that I matter by doing that tiny little piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And oh, that's so gorgeous. So moving to the love, that's so funny. A second ago, it's like, oh, and I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. If it comes back later, it will. If not, that's fine. But moving to the love part of the feel, love, heal framework I developed, that uppercase self-care, that recognition. And I realize I always feel a bit like I help people with self-care, but it's like not a you have to do this because you're already whole, you're already like everyone. If only we could just know that we don't have to perform, we don't have to do anything to be, but that can take. In psychosynthesis, there's the will archetype and the love archetype, and there are different types of will, and love is that kind of supportive, accepting energy. And like with EFT, you start off with the whatever the issue is, I deeply and completely love and accept myself, or without that love, without that acceptance, any kind of change is so challenging. And yet we're constantly trying to like you said about the routine, I just realized that was it. I was up again till 3:30 last night because I'm on the ADHD medication now, which is much better, but I had been meaning to delete thousands of photos for months and months and months, years even. And I'm putting together a couple of presentations which involve finding pictures of my rescue cats because it's using them to explain polyvagal theory. And naturally, I had like thousands of pictures of the cats. And when I finally figured out an easy way to delete them, it was like, I'll do this for all the underwater pictures as well, and all the donkeys, and then it's like 3:30 in the morning, and it's like, Evie cat, come on, like so 10 shoulder rolls. It's like I love the kind of micro projects, and I love the idea of being that person. But it's like last night, it's like I know if I don't do it now, I'll forget this system that has suddenly made it easier. So applauding micro and wishing I could do it better.
Don't get me wrong, I also go all in on the macro regularly. Kind of preparing for the podcast, I really had to pull myself away from, creating because it's just exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think again, I think for me, the diagnosis has really helped with that love part, that like ADHD brain, it's okay. Whereas before it'd be like, why, why? Anyway, the two of you, what helps you with that love part, that acceptance?
Yeah. Should I go first this time? Yeah. Okay. So I feel like this is a massive part of my work, and it's the thing that I really love the most. And so what I've been thinking about, sort of as you've been explaining your framework and all of that, is well, really kind of focused in parts work, which is what I do. But really that looking at I think it often comes down to parts that feel like you don't deserve it in some way. And I see there being two parts to this. So one is the kind of defeated that I would see as like a wounded child, I don't deserve it. But also the kind of more critical parent parts that might say you don't deserve it. And so having to sort of kind of having to navigate both of those, almost like a kind of it feels like it's a negotiation sometimes, or like a mediation between different parts of you that are really kind of holding a lot of strong energy, and having to find a way forward that works for all of the parts. Like when you say you've got this photo system and and you're on it, I couldn't just go in there and just be like, right, time's up, time to go. That there has to be that negotiation of that. But I think the skill of doing that involves a lot of self-compassion, a lot of compassion for these parts, a lot of willing to be curious about what's going on for these parts, a lot of compassion for whatever comes up, and a lot of courage to change, because it's hard to change and scary to change, particularly for a lot of these parts that are holding on to these ways for really good reason.
This wasn't meant to turn into a therapy session, but I'm realizing it very much was a fearful subpersonality. That was that, like when I worked in an office and everyone would laugh at my handover notes because they'd go for pages, because I was worried if I took a week off I would forget how to do my job. And it's that what happens if you do forget? It just means you have to remember, you have to, but that compassion and that acceptance and that,
just recognizing that there's a really good reason behind the things that we do. I've mentioned it on the podcast, but one of my favorite quotes is, if something looks like it doesn't make sense, look closer, because it makes sense. It makes sense.
Oh, thank you. And Carly?
It's an interesting one. I was talking to Alice on the podcast, I can't remember which episode it was, but I realised that anytime I was talking about when things have really shifted for me, I kept saying 5 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 years ago. And I made a comment, I said, why do I keep saying 5 years ago? What was it about 5 years ago? And Alice just went, the pandemic. And I was like, oh yes, that was it. And I've worked on a lot of this stuff for most of my life, but a massive shift happened during the pandemic, because it was a time when I realised so many things about myself. That the pandemic, well, to be fair, not the pandemic, the lockdowns actually showed me and made me just learn a lot of lessons about myself. And in learning those lessons, I guess you kind of presented with a choice when life went back to sort of normal. Do I go back to how I was living before, or do I start to accept that actually I need to change the way that I'm living in the world in a way that is going to actually suit and benefit me? And that means having to accept certain things about myself that I might not want to accept. But what's the alternative if I don't? And so I'd say over the past 5 years, and I am going to use the word radical because I think I've always been working on it, but the lockdowns and the pandemic led me to sort of radically start to work on these things. And it was also the pandemic where I started to realize that I was autistic, and then I realized that I'm also ADHD. I've always described myself as a highly sensitive person. So putting all of those things together just meant that I am going to have to start treating myself differently and changing the way in which I behave. That's less about what I feel I should do or need to do to be accepted in the world, and actually what I need to do for myself. And I like what you said earlier, Alice, about, you mentioned about what smaller things, how can I make this smaller where I'm still doing something that feels good, but is what I need. And I would say I've definitely applied that to myself. And I've also leaned a lot more into the idea of slow living. I've realized that the fast-paced world is not for me. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to live slowly and more gently. I think the word gentle has just been so present for the past couple of years. And it's not just creating like a slower, more gentler way of being that honors the different parts of me and what they need, but also then learning to tell myself, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the harder part, and the part that I would say still crops up and I'm still working on. Yeah. Also just knowing that, and it's okay to be that way in the world, because there are so many messages that say it's not, or you're less than, or you're incapable. That's not fun. That's not exciting. Like so many different things. So I think the heart part that you're speaking to makes me think of that phrase, this, and this, and that's okay.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, like you're saying that, it's like, yeah, but we're mammals. We're wired to only be in sympathetic mode a very short percentage of the time. Like we're not, a lot of the like sympathetic activation is exciting. A lot of it, like there's loads going on. We're so lucky in so many ways. And we need to consciously retrain the nervous system to allow that rest, digest, to allow, and we know we're wired this way. Like I've been teaching yoga students and clients like nearly 15 years around this, and listening to you talk, it's like when it comes to on an individual level and someone is asking you something or offering you something, or you're thinking I just want to do, it's like constant countering. Even like you think about the flu or a cold, or thinking about like kind of growing up in London and all the adverts on the tube, like from Lemsip to things way like more powerful, and the idea is your body needs a rest, so power through and like infect all your colleagues and everyone else you meet on public transport. And it's countering our excitement, our curiosity, our wanting to do more, and also internalized ableism and other people's expectations. And yeah, thank you. And I hope I haven't just interrupted you.
No. It kind of made me think about when you were talking about the nervous system, and is something that I'm sure all of us will talk to clients about when we're talking about, when we're sort of doing that basic psychoeducation on the nervous system. But the antelope that's just been chased by the lion and escaped can immediately go back to eating the grass and immediately get back into their parasympathetic nervous system. Whereas we can't. That high level of consciousness that we have, that I sometimes say, is that really a good thing? But because we have that, we're not able to do that, because we will go into the anxiety and the rumination and the thinking, oh, what if so this could happen, and what if the lion comes back, and all of those other thoughts that essentially
and I'm
learning
so
how to bring us.
Lion didn't go for it. I shouldn't have stopped.
Yeah, exactly. I shouldn't have stopped, or victim blaming ourselves. Oh, I shouldn't have wandered to that part of the Sahara. Like, oh dear, that's my bad. All of those other things that we might do. But for ourselves, because we do that for our situations, that it is an active, intentional process to try to then regulate ourselves on the other side of these things. Because unfortunately, unlike other mammals, it's not automatically going to happen. Oh, sometimes, of course, but I do think that we have to be quite intentional about it.
But this is where we can learn from our cats and others and take them as inspiration. And
yes, I'll often use my dogs as an example of that. A period of high stress, you'll see them shake, like they're literally shaking off the stress, and they know how to do that automatically. But if for anyone who's like new in therapy, if your therapist suggests just stand up and shake your body, sometimes people can look at you like, Really? Like, it feels a bit weird, but it naturally comes to animals in the animal kingdom that do all sorts of things to regulate.
I used to shake uncontrollably. I used to have to stand against walls long before I understood about my own trauma and everything. And I used to be mortified, walking around, and I realized if I was stressed, handing an assignment in at uni or something, but I'd be standing against walls. And then when I was doing the yoga therapy training, and they were on about the shaking and the Impala and Peter Levine's work and all, and TRE or Trey, where people learn to shake. And it's no, I used to do all that naturally. And
Yeah.
But again, when you realize it's a release of energy, it's what the Impala does, it's what the dog does, it's what the more we can just accept and love and okay, I'm feeling a bit shaky today, time to be gentler with myself, or time to so moving to the heal part, that collective care, that turning that often stronger justice sensitivity and heartbreak about what's going on in the world or for other people. I'd love to know what helps you know, first of all, that you have attended enough to yourself to be able to look out, to potentially think of post-traumatic growth, to potentially think of other people, and what kind of things help you. I realize I'm asking, I could talk to you both all day. I'm trying to I'm asking a lot of you, but what springs to mind?
Feels like such a big question, and part of me wants to go, "Oh, I don't know if I am there. I don't know if I am there." I feel like, so at the moment, I feel like I'm coming out of a really difficult few years and just starting to find my feet, and I'm feeling a bit like a beginner again. And then obviously also being faced with everything that's going on in the world. And I used to religiously follow the news and really kind of all the time be aware of what was going on, and now I'm at a point where I'm aware that it's I'm in a privileged position to be able to do this, but to not look. But it's so easy to get kind of hooked back in. I don't know, I kind of
and I want to also clarify, I think there's a lot of guilt. Again, the 24-hour news cycle, it's for ratings. There's an American woman who used to work for CNN, whose name I've forgotten, but she started up a nervous system friendly news network, or newsletter or something. But she shares stuff, but in a way that isn't going to trigger and make you stay tuned until after the adverts and all of that. And with the kind of collective care element, I think with the pandemic, with what's going on in the world, a lot of it isn't necessarily about global, it's about your neighbours or your family, or just recognizing the importance of community and leaning into that ourselves, as well as okay, we're all caring professionals, we're all therapists, so there's that, but that even allowing yourself to be held, allowing yourself to be supported. Wondering if that helps at all, or
how that in terms of where I am at the moment, I feel like that's been a big part of it. So one of the things that I've been going through the last few years is I've become estranged from my mum for the second time. So that has meant that I've had to kind of reassess, what family means, what support means, what community means. At one point, it meant a significant rupture with my sister as well. So we've had to reassess how that is. But what I did notice when I kind of withdrew from my mum and my sister for a while is that it actually created space for me to look to other people and be curious about what that kind of connection could be like. Because I've had a lot of difficult connections in my life, and so find it really hard to trust. So I feel like I'm only just really kind of stepping out and challenging myself with that community piece. So and kind of having Carly as a friend has been a wonderful part of that, and just starting to kind of, because Carly's so caring and so generous and so lovely in her support of me. But one thing I've noticed is that I find it really hard to be open to that. It feels really scary just to say, actually, I'm having a bad day. So yeah, just kind of stepping out into that and starting to trust that Carly's not going to collapse under. I'm not too much for Carly. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm sorry you've had such a difficult time, but that's something that isn't talked about enough, I think, when it comes to, co-regulation is so essential for mammals, for trauma recovery, and with interpersonal trauma, it's so hard to trust anyone else.
Yeah.
We learned from babies that we were too much, or we were betrayed or not protected, or all. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Carly?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I feel like you just said some really lovely things about me, Alice. Thank you. But yeah, sometimes it's like when you've popped round for a takeaway and you'll say, oh yeah, and then you'll share with me what happened, but maybe it happened a month ago or something. I'm like, wait, why are you only just telling me this? And so sometimes it can be really hard. Sometimes once we see someone, we might feel, as the conversation flows, feel a bit safer to talk. But that's quite different, isn't it, from when you don't see each other that often, potentially due to distance, to then just, it's more active, isn't it? It's going out your way to send a message, to tell someone what's going on. And I think that feels very different to being in company, and the conversation just kind of naturally goes there.
Yeah. And I think, again, the community thing, imagining what it would have been like for our ancient ancestors working side by side, and having all of those moments to share in a really, whereas now it is that, and also trying to remember, what do I want to share? What do I need to express? Because I might forget, and then like ruminating on it rather than having those organic moments. And some people preferring to share by text or email, which is then harsher than face-to-face or phone. But yeah, this has gone in a different direction to I expected it to. But it's really important that. Do you find it like, I love the way, Carly, you just said thank you, Alice, for you accepted even her compliments. That sounded like you did that quite naturally. Has that come easily to you, or is that something you've worked on, accepting?
Yeah, I have worked a lot on it, and I still find it uncomfortable. So when Alice was saying those things, I might have just said thank you, but inside I was a bit like, what is she saying?
Now I've drawn attention to it because you sounded
so
really...
it feels like it's, I think it's put in like it feels like an attention thing. It's not always comfortable with like attention being drawn to me. But obviously it's, when I say it's silly, I don't mean that in a dismissive way towards myself. It's nice things. It's fine for that attention to come my way. I think what it triggers in me is then I feel like I've got to make it equal now. I now need to come back and say loads of wonderful things about Alice. And I think what came up with me was a bit of panic of, oh, right, now I need to make sure it's reciprocated, and Alice knows how wonderful she is. Yeah, but then the second thought was, it's okay. You don't need, you can just receive. It's okay.
Yeah, allowing, yeah. Oh, well, I hope you will both receive my enormous appreciation for both of you. I'm delighted you're staying on to do the Soul to Soul Circle. But do you have anything you'd like to end with for the podcast?
Ooh, that feels like I feel like the answer should be yes. Is there anything in particular?
Not at all. You've shared so much, and I've kept you longer than I told you I'd be keeping you. But I loved what you were saying and kept asking more.
No, that's okay. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
So I will say thank you so much. And do you want to say again where people can find you?
Go on, Carly.
I'm just laughing as we both look at each other like, who goes first? Yeah, so people can find me on Instagram as the sensitivity therapist _ between the words. My website is carlyradford.com. You can email me hello@carlyradford.com. And I provide individual therapy, group therapy for late identified autistic adults, and then, of course, the podcast, which you can find at Too Much Apparently, also on Instagram. And you can listen to the podcast on basically all platforms. And I also just want to add on that, thank you so much for inviting us and for being like a champion of it, for saying it's only just launched. It just feels really lovely.
It is such a gorgeous, gorgeous podcast, though. The two of you, everyone do please listen. It's gorgeous. I'm welling up a little bit here. So thank
really
you.
lovely.
And Alice?
Yeah, so mainly I'm on Instagram, which is at Reparenting with Alice. My website is alicechew.com. So I do individual therapy and including EMDR and supervision as well. Do I need to add anything else? I don't think so. You've got the podcast in there, so
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And amazing. Thank you for listening to the Feel Better Everyday podcast. If you'd like more, you can join the Soul to Soul Circle in order to access a rich archive of exclusive content, including deeper dives into every episode and also the entire Love Your Whole Self chakra journey. And you might also enjoy the book 365 Ways to Feel Better, Self-Care Ideas for Embodied Wellbeing. You can get more information, you can access loads of many libraries of free resources and much more at selfcarecoaching.net. And you can also connect with me and let me know how you're getting on. So have a gorgeous week, and I look forward to sharing more soon. And this episode was produced by me, your host, Eve Menezes Cunningham.